I have this new thing where I dance on the screen and bop to. My husband was kind enough to sing Eminem this morning, so that's the song that's going in my
Oh,
head. Guess
is
who's
this
back?
Slim Shady? Slim
Yeah,
Shady? Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. We'll wait for people to join us. Okay, well, for those of you that are going to be watching the replay, let us know in the comments that you're watching the replay. And if this is your first time, then feel free to let us know that as well. This is my first time going live on my personal page for a really long time. And Robin, your first time
Yes.
going live on my personal page. So, all right, we're going to dive in today and super excited to have you here. We're going to dive into some juicy things. And our topic for today is really focusing on we're all getting results in our business. I think as entrepreneurs, I don't know if you find this, but I think we're always, hey, how are you? We're always behind, right? And like I never feel ahead in my business. I don't know if you do as well. But let me just see what's going on here. I am going to just go ahead and take care of something here before we dive in and get started. And hopefully I will find what's going on.
I'm going to have a sip of coffee.
Yeah. Well, I just don't need this person who's clearly just trolling / going to be making comments on here that are unnecessary. So that's how you do it, folks. You just block people that are being ridiculous. So there you have it. I could see your face, Robin. So there we go. We're striving to LinkedIn. I'm a little surprised at you, LinkedIn, that you're allowing that people to comment on that. But anyways, I would expect that from Facebook, but not on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
For those of you that are watching the replay, we just have someone that's going to be doing the whole spammy thing on video. Anyways, Dr. Robin McKay and I have been connected for a really long time. We had a conversation privately, and we realized that regardless of where we're at in business, we're always getting results. They might not always be the results we want, but we're always getting results, but we tend to not be getting the results that we want anyways. I think it's the Achilles heel of an entrepreneur to always feel like they're behind. But then there's some actual clinical reasons that may be getting in the way, which we're going to dive into. It's going to be a bit of a surprise. We're going to dive into what this surprising thing might be for you and how common it is and some of the telltale signs of why this particular thing that of course we're going to reveal in a moment might be holding you back in business from getting the results that you want. And you might be going down a shame spiral and thinking, what's wrong with me? And how come everyone else seems to get it right and I don't? And once you hear what it might be, and Robin's going to be really great as a trained award-winning psychologist to be able to let you know some of the telltale signs of this particular issue and how this may be playing out for you in your business. And then of course, how we can get you on track, because it really is nothing that you're doing. It's actually something that will probably give you great relief if this does apply to you, so that you can start looking at how to get results in your business. So if you haven't met Dr. Robin McKay, she's an award-winning psychologist, as I mentioned, a very hotshot entrepreneur, highly, highly sought after executive coach to Fortune 500 companies and people in the high up people in the entertainment industry. She's also a leading expert in the field of spiritual intelligence. She builds bridges between reason and intuition, science and spirit, and clients' heads and hearts. She's really big on helping people, follow their heart's desire. She also specializes in a lot of things. Corporate seeks her out a lot for burnout and so on. And Robin, I love that post that you put together for how leaders are leading right now and how burnt out people are in corporate, like exceptionally burnt out. So I love the work that you're doing there, but you also work a lot with entrepreneurs. And another specialty that you have is ADHD. So let's dive in and chat about what we're going to chat
ADHD.
about.
ADHD. Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you so much for setting this up. This is so
thank
great
you
to be able
it's 8:00 your time, 8 a.m. I should say your time. and 11 o'clock for me because I'm on Eastern time zone. So I have the benefit of a little more sleep than you do. Anyways, to give people the backstory, I'm not going to share who, but someone really close in my life has recently been diagnosed with ADD. And I'm very up close and personal with this person. And so I get to see how ADD plays out in their life. And recently in one of my money programs, I saw someone do what I think a lot of us coaches see. And we think, is this resistance? What's going on here? This must be resistance, because this person knows what time the calls are. This person knows where to find A, B, and C to make the most of their program. So why are they saying that they can't find these things and other people are finding these things? How come? I was just in an energy of curiosity. How is this happening? And we know there's memes created for this kind of stuff, for people that ask questions that have already been answered and so on. But there was something about this energy, and I just recognized it differently. And I thought, So I asked her, is this showing up for you just in this program? Because that's natural in a money program. People get a lot of resistance, as do I, right? When we're moving through our next level. Or is this showing up in other places? And they said, oh no, I feel this way everywhere. And I said, wow, that's got to be exhausting. And then it hit me. So I asked her if she suspected these things about herself. And she said yes. So I instantly got on the Voxer with Robin and said, oh my God, we need to do something. We need to do something for people, because I've got to think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are doing all the right things, signing up for the courses, doing the implementation, creating the content, doing the marketing the way everyone's telling them to do, all of the right things. And yet something is not clicking, and how exhausting that must be. But also, like I was mentioning, we can go into that blame, shame, judgment game of what's wrong with me, and optically on social media, we know that people present themselves a certain way. We don't really know, right, for the most part, but presumably, we get into a little bit of comparisonitis on social media, and then it's probably a push-pull game of, okay, I know I'm a smart person, I can figure this out, and apparently I'm not as smart as everyone else because I'm doing all the right things and it's not coming together. So with that, let's dive in and chat about what it might look like for someone who, whether they have ADD or not, but we're going to talk about folks that won't even know they have it. They won't even realize all these years that this is actually clinically, if they were to go through an assessment, likely what they have. But what are some examples of how this might show up in business where people are doing all the right things and it's just not coming together?
Well, first of all, if they were to take an assessment, even on like WebMD or something like that, the chances are they would either forget to complete it, get bored with it, get distracted by it, or finish it, get the results, and then forget where they put the results. How do I know this? Well, not only am I obviously trained in this field of neurodiversity, really is the larger umbrella term that we look at here, but specifically ADHD, but I also have it. I have the diagnosis. And so I've got a personal and professional stake and interest and passion for educating and kind of clearing some of this up so that people can have levels of success that they can see in their mind's eye, but hasn't quite materialized yet. So when we look at some of the things that are going on for entrepreneurs, particularly, who, even if they are diagnosed, maybe they haven't given enough credit to that aspect of their brain or how their brain is wired in terms of what's going on in their business. And chances are quite good that they're also comparing themselves to what's called neurotypical people without ADHD, who are their coaches, who are their peers, their colleagues, who are getting the results. And so when you're constantly in comparison with other people who you think, well, I've been in this business as long or longer than they have, why are they getting the results and I'm not getting the results? So we have to look at a couple of different angles when it comes into entrepreneurship. We have to look at energy and activity levels. So we think about uneven performance. We talk a lot about feast or famine cycles, but if somebody with ADHD, either diagnosed or undiagnosed, has an uneven performance, a history of uneven performance, that's going to show up possibly as a feast or famine cycle. There's also that hyper focus, being able to focus for long periods of time on a project, a program, a development of something versus being distracted by all the shiny objects out there. So we also hear a lot about shiny object syndrome within entrepreneur circles. We see also with the energy and activity levels, just burnout, exhaustion, but we also get on the other side of that too with the hypomania, the intensity and the excitement seeking that comes along with some of the characteristics of ADHD.
I'm so glad you're sharing that. And it's occurring to me, hi, everyone, if you're just joining us, do me a favor and hit the share button. There's likely at least 75 entrepreneurs in your life, in your friends feed right now, that need to hear this. So we're talking about ADHD and how many people are undiagnosed with it. And yet it's quite possible that it's going to show up as a pattern of feast or famine, shiny object syndrome. I know people with ADHD, ADD, however we're calling it, also use deadlines, right? They wait until the 11th hour and use deadlines because they're so distracted and they really can only give their attention to things that are interesting enough to them that if there's something really boring, but it has to get done, they're likely going to leave it until the 11th hour.
So they get dinged for procrastination. And the other thing along with deadlines I'm seeing that entrepreneurs use is low balance in their bank accounts as another way of managing their energy or using something to push against in order to go out and do the next thing, go out and make the next sale. And it keeps you in that, it keeps them in that cycle of feast or famine and that cycle of using time and money as not necessarily as allies, but as adversaries to keep them focused, keep their attention on the thing that they need to be doing.
To remind them that they need to push through. Yeah. And what is the office likely to look like of someone with ADHD?
Well, if we could turn my office around, I tune in a lot to my intuition. And last night I was just meditating before bed. And what came through very clearly is clear the clutter. It's something that it's so interesting too, that I am somebody who likes order. I like organization, but I don't like to do it. And so I'll let my office get a little bit more cluttered. So you're going to see papers, stacks, piles of papers or things spread out because there is this, with people who have ADHD, there's this kind of blindness. It's out of sight, out of mind. So if I don't see it, it's not there. So we'll see a lot of leaving drawers and cupboards open. If you've got somebody in your house who does that, I'm not saying that's diagnostic, but
yeah. Yes, I am aware of that. I can't tell you how I'm aware of that, but and then what about someone's inbox? What is that likely to look like?
Lots of unread emails. They actually will use inboxes as permanent filing cabinets rather than, and this whole notion, I haven't heard about it for a while, but I remember probably 7 or 8 years ago, there was a whole movement about zero inbox. I want zero inbox. And I know me and my people were like, oh, that's never going to happen. So it sets you up for feeling like a failure because if so-and-so, the successful entrepreneur has a zero inbox, I better have a zero inbox. And it's not something that can be prioritized necessarily, or it becomes such an obsession that that's all we'll do is sit and clear inbox, clear inbox, clear inbox, and get down to, maybe not zero, but not 10,000 either. And then get distracted and then it builds back up again.
And then what about response time to emails?
Either now or never. Either now or never. What happens in the brain of somebody with ADHD who's got in emails? They'll say, I know I need to answer this. So you keep it top of mind until you can get back to it. So you're holding a lot more information just in your memory stores, which then is a drain on your psychic energy. It's a drain on your focus and attention as well. So you're keeping all this stuff in the back of your mind that you have to do, and inevitably something will drop off the table. And then it gets into that vicious kind of spiral of, oh, that dropped off the radar. Oh, I'm a bad person. Oh, I screwed up again. So there's a constant threat of screwing up, of disappointing somebody, of failing. That, by the way, didn't start in entrepreneur land, did it? It started all the way back in second or third grade with a messy desk, with sloppy handwriting, or with daydreaming and reading books in class rather than paying attention to the teacher. Or I used to doodle and get in trouble for doodling all the time, even though I was so grateful to find out later that doodling increases your ability to retain mundane information by about 30%. So when I learned that, then I could use that when I got in trouble for doodling.
I'm thinking of, because I've been an entrepreneur now for 25 years. And when I think of like joint ventures and I think summits and podcasts and things like that, like as someone that collaborates a lot, it can be challenging to invite people back when they flake on appointments, when they flake on agreeing to promote when they don't, or when they keep missing things and asking it to be rescheduled, and all the things like that, right? And of course, like you said, and I know this from the person that I know very closely that has been recently diagnosed, that they're actually a very responsible person. But based on our evaluation of what responsibility looks like, it would be hard for me with this particular person that I know on a personal note, would be hard for me to, I don't see them as irresponsible, but I definitely don't see them as responsible. But to your point, they leave things out because they're so afraid they're going to forget it. Before they even get out of bed in the day, they're already like, who am I going to hear from today that I've disappointed, that I don't even know I've disappointed, because I don't even know I forgot something or flaked on something or didn't send an email or didn't cross a T or dot an I or things like that. And so what kind of price have you seen people pay for having this either not managed or completely undiagnosed?
Well, just what you're talking about with the not being invited back and having judgments then projected on to the person with the diversity, because people just don't understand what's going on there. Now, I do think that there's a balance, isn't there? There's a healthy understanding about what's going on. For example, I just posted on I think I've got it on LinkedIn too, but definitely on Facebook, just a call for podcast guests for my Mindset RX podcast, where I'm looking at spiritual entrepreneurs, CEOs, and leaders with ADHD or who think they do. So every entrepreneur who has ADHD, who's doing really well in their business, has raised their hand and said, yes, I want to be on the podcast. But I'll bet 50% of them haven't scheduled their podcast yet. And so I know what I'm wading into when we've got people who have got brains that are neurodiverse. We have to look at what are the accommodations that we can provide for them to make sure that they feel successful. But also on the other end of that, there is obviously a personal responsibility and a leadership that we need to pay attention to as well. So it's got to be a both and, rather than someone else like you, Jennifer, if you're doing a JV, taking full responsibility for somebody with ADHD who's trying to get scheduled for your JV and it just isn't working out. Not that you would do that, but we don't ever want to turn our colleagues, the leaders, into victims or put them in a place of less than, because they're certainly not.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts going through my head, because if we look at the last 2 years and we're in surge capacity, right? Because we're just having a lot come at us. We're having to increase our energy hygiene. We have grief, we have anticipatory grief, we have trauma, we have compound trauma, we have all of these various things just, stabbing our adrenals, right? Is it possible that some of the distraction over the last 2 years is related to the fact that we're navigating the paradox?
So I specifically have a background in working with gifted and talented people who also have something else going on. They're called twice exceptional. So people who have fast brains in their heads, who have ADHD or a mood disorder or something like that. We wrote about that in our book, Smart Girls in the 21st Century. And one of the things that we say is that talented people with something else going on, a neurodiversity, have the capacity to mask their disability, not because they're trying to hide anything and not because they're trying to be manipulative, but just because they can. And so the way I describe it is when you have vast intellectual resources, vast psychic energy, you can just deploy some of that intellectual resource to manage the distractibility or to keep yourself in your seat doing your work rather than getting up and going to the refrigerator, walking around the house, or whatever it is that you're doing to manage the energy instead. But in the last 2 years, we've had all of these other difficulties, challenges that you mentioned that have been also competing for our intellectual capacity. So when you reach surge capacity, of course, then we're going to run out of gas in terms of being able to manage these symptoms that have been probably managed for a long, long time, just simply through sheer force of will or sheer intellectual deployment of intellectual resources to that particular difficulty.
Yeah, I watch my son, and I can see how he employs certain things, right, to navigate this stuff. How he, in a world where he has less and less control and more things out of his control, how he will micromanage his stuff, or he now needs his keyboard perfectly square to his, computer, things like that, which I'm okay with. And I'm sure he has some neurodiversity, but we're not really all that motivated to go and get a label plunked on him, right? So we just kind of recognize what it is and address it accordingly. But then I think we get into adulthood, and we've got the paradox right now. Then, so if someone has ADHD and then they're also navigating the paradox, and then they also have some trauma, because that's the other thing that occurs to me. I've got to think that the symptoms or how ADHD presents itself is pretty similar to trauma. So how do we know the difference between someone's having a trauma response, and that's what's been activated, versus ADHD?
So here's how I conceptualize it. First thing we need to understand is that the symptoms of ADHD are basically the same as the characteristics of the creative, intuitive personality. So at the core, we have this, we'll just say, a creative personality, open to experiences, highly imaginative, aka ability to daydream, to wander off in different directions, a sense of adventure, a deep sense of just being able to feel, to understand one's own emotions and the emotions of other people, to challenge the status quo. So that's at the core. Then that personality factor gets run through the nervous system. So now we have the nervous system, which is where the ADHD is located. It's an executive functioning, I'm going to say, disorder, but we're looking at the central nervous system as in the prefrontal cortex in particular, where the executive functions lie. So we've got that. So that's the distractibility, the impulsivity, and the hyperactivity as those kind of main features of the ADHD. Then on top of that, like the outside layer is going to be, the way I'm looking at it, is the trauma. So we have to tease that out, and it's not simple and it's not easy to do that. But I do know that I've done in my 20 years of doing this work, a lot of trauma work with people, with Inform people, trauma work for myself as well. And when I look at the trauma work that's been done and they're still having symptoms, they've still got stuff going on, chances are quite good that it's going to be an ADHD or an executive function situation that we've got to look at too. So if we're doing trauma work, I know trauma-informed coaching is big right now, and we've both had bees in our bonnets about that sometimes when people are using that phrase. But when we're looking at trauma, I think we also have to look at personality, and we have to look at the neurodiversity, the ADHD, as part of that. as well. Does that make sense how I kind of parse
Yeah,
that out?
absolutely. And I'm also thinking of hyperactivity. Like I would have my own perception of what it would mean to be hyperactive. And I imagine that word has connotations for everyone. But I do know that there's a lot of people that have ADHD that are not outwardly hyper. I think we
Right.
expect to see people talking a mile a minute or needing to jump on a trampoline 4 hours a day or things like that. But how else does hyperactivity show up?
The need for having not just new experiences, but exciting experiences. We've just had the fireworks last night. So, you know, all the ADHD kids were like completely mesmerized by that, including me. So the need for activity, to be doing something, the do piece is, but we usually look at the hyperactivity with the traditional stereotypical boy with hyperactivity. Can't stop moving. He's like a shark. If he stops moving, he stops breathing, that kind of thing. As adults, that's gonna translate into shaking your foot when and it's actually a mechanism to focus energy. If you see somebody's knee bouncing or foot shaking, chances are quite good that they're focusing their energy. They're not doing it because they're feeling impatient. It's just as a focusing mechanism for them. And then not being able to sit in your seat. Just sit down and do your work. Just sit down and type this email. Just sit down and ... right? Whatever that is. And not being able to do that. So having an overactivated nervous system is a part of that impulsivity or hyperactivity that we're going to be seeing. If you could just sit down and do your work, Jennifer.
Well, I'm not going to sit down and do my work because I have a low compliance rate. I think everyone knows that about me. You tell me to zag, I'm going to be like, no, I'm going to zag. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have generated a lot of income in your business over the years. You've created a lot of big things. And, and so you're a poster child for being able to thrive as an entrepreneur. It doesn't mean you haven't had your challenges, so to speak, right? Because you'll have to exert your energy differently, I would imagine, to get these things accomplished and go from idea to actually making sure that it's, in form. But what things have worked for you as far as being able to market when you don't want to market, to make sales when you don't want to make sales, to do the things that we typically hear entrepreneurs just not having either the desire or the focus to get done? What are some of the things that you've employed that have been really helpful for you?
So the energy work that I do for myself, whether it's working in the Akashic Records or Reiki or anything that has to do with managing my own energy field, making sure that my energy field is clear. And I know that sounds, maybe if we're on LinkedIn, and maybe it sounds a little bit woo, but that's where we're actually headed in terms of even the corporate space, is managing energy, not people. So I think that the better that we can manage our own energy, whether or not you have ADHD, the easier it is to stay focused on the things that need to get done. There are a couple of things. One is falling in love with an idea. If we're not somebody who can do a lot of, we collectively, the ADHDers among us, aren't somebody who can just do something for the sake of doing it, and we're not good at busy work. So we have to have that inner drive, that vision that comes forward as something that is so important. And listen, I do a little bit of what would happen if I don't do this? How will I feel if this doesn't come about? What does that feel like inside? And if I feel disappointed in myself or sad or frustrated or whatever kind of negative emotion, I guess you would say, I use that kind of as a backstop for what I'm doing. Oh, I don't want to have that feeling. I don't want to have that experience. I want to have this experience over here. So it's constantly navigating that desire to, be a sloth and watch Netflix and eat bonds versus going out, getting in the game and doing the work. Now, one of the things that I've learned from you over the years is how important consistency is. In the ADHD/entrepreneur areas of the metaverse, we'll say, there's a lot of talk about ADHD entrepreneurs don't have to be consistent and you should be able to follow your energy. I'm still there is such a value in consistency, in
Mhm.
being consistent, in other words, that when I'm looking at consistency, I also have to look at how can I make this consistency novel, unique, interesting? How can I tweak this a little bit so that I've got a slightly different angle at it so that my dopamine will come online, which is what a lot of our, what neurologically a lot of it is that we need is the dopamine surges to come online to be able to stay focused, to be able to stay interested. So how can I do that? And that has to do with self-discipline. One of the things that, and that's a muscle that we have to build, not to be like the neurotypicals, but it is if we've fallen in love with an idea, if it's something that we're passionate about, that we're good at, that we know that we're here to make a contribution and to master, then that needs to be kind of the things that keep us between the ditches in terms of our performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you block your time? Is there a way that you manage your time so that you can be more focused?
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't. When I have a big vision, something that I'm really focused on, that's when I'm kind of all in. And I do get a little bit hyper. I shouldn't say a little bit. I do get hyper focused when I'm all in on something and it's a go. I just do it. And I always have. That's how I've managed my energy. And I also have to take time for rest. I took 2 naps yesterday without judgment. So we have to, that's how one of my biggest keys is napping, actually, to give myself some space, napping without judgment, without I should push through. I'm going to honor my energy, but I'm also going to come back to it. So I look at it as a promise that I make to myself to keep moving forward.
I like that you bring up naps because the person that kind of inspired this, I know they take at least 2 naps a day. And people can judge that and think, what is wrong with you? Why are you lazy? Any of the other judgments that we're going to project onto that. But from what I understand from this person, they get so tired from having to be focused, especially focused on things that are out of their either out of their zone of genius or just they don't care about. And so I'm glad that you do that. So you and I'm bringing this up for a reason because I know that this helps with ADHD, or it'll help people get more clear. So when was it? 2 years ago that we did my NEO assessment?
Yeah.
And so Robin does this thing called, it's a spiritual intelligence assessment, and it's very thorough, and people lose their marbles when they get this done because it's so informative. And if you're going to get it done with anyone, get it done with Robin because she's actually clinically trained. Little side note, and this is me being me. And I know, Robin, you feel the same way. Like, I'm a big believer in people staying in their lane. And I see a lot of people offering trauma-informed coaching. And I really want to pull my hair out. Like, you and I are both clinically trained in trauma, right? We've spent a great deal, several thousand, like Malcolm Gladwell hours, 10,000 times, however many, right, of dealing with trauma. And you and I know a few other people that actually truly have boots on the ground experience with dealing with trauma. And if you do have trauma, I would highly recommend that you connect with Robin. Additionally, if you suspect that you have ADHD, I highly recommend that you connect with Robin, because she has just spent this time telling you that she speaks your language, but also she's clinically trained in this. Anyways, in the NEO assessment, what compelled me to do it is you had said the NEO assessment's really good at helping you figure out your shadow clients.
Yeah.
And I'm a go and make things happen kind of person, as you know. Like, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I probably have some form of neurodivergence too. That being said, I attract a lot of people that are talkers and not walkers, and I just don't speak their language. I just can't even. But because I have such a low, what do you call it? A low neuroticism, which just means I get the more stressful things get, the calmer I get. So I attract people that are in a chronic chaos tornado and think that they're going to bring that to my doorstep and that I'm going to deal with that. And I'm just not available for that, right? Just not available for that level of drama. So point being is that because you had mentioned that, I naturally wanted to work with you to find out who are my shadow clients and how do I stop talking to them? Because I want you to be served, but I'm not. I'm going to nip that I'm going to bring down the hammer, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard on your energy field to see how quickly I say we don't do chaos here, right? Whereas other people are happy to deal with that. So, but also you had mentioned that in the NEO assessment that there's certain markers that can help us understand how our intuition plays out in a lot of these things, and to also be able to assess for ADHD and so on. So I'll let you talk about that, because you you have better words for that than I do.
You know, the NEO is the gold standard of personality assessments. And one of the things that I can track with when I look at that assessment is your level of spiritual intelligence. This is something that I've been working on for years privately in my personal research. Along with that, there are personality characteristics that are associated with ADHD. So it's not an ADHD assessment, but I can certainly tell in the personality if chances are pretty good that there's some ADHD showing up, like with the impulsivity, like with the high level of imagination that especially spiritual entrepreneurs have, but also intuitive leaders and CEOs will have this high level of imagination, which, if you look at the criteria for ADHD, you're going to see as daydreaming, as defocusing, as not being able to pay attention, that kind of thing, carelessness with details, all of the kind of negative connotations of that will show up very beautifully in a spiritual entrepreneur or leader's business or work with the vision. They're the visionaries. We're the visionaries. And so we want to be able to capitalize on that while filling some of the challenges or the difficulties we have that are inherent within the personality, inherent within the nervous system, that create the conditions for us to look distracted or to look like we don't care or careless or irresponsible. And one of the things that I like to really focus on when I'm doing the NEO assessment and interpretation with somebody is their level of competence. You have a high level of competence. Competence is just simply, it's not even how well you do something, it's how well you think you can do something. So
I definitely have a high level of that.
Yes. One of the things that happens with leaders who have ADHD is that we present as having a high level of competence. It actually presents as bravado, though, because internally, the internal system is like, oof, I know I'm supposed to be able to do that. I'm intuitively aware enough to know that I'm smart enough to be able to do this. I should be able to accomplish it, but I'm not sure that I can. And we attribute that not to the ADHD, but am I smart enough? Maybe I'm an imposter. We get into imposter syndrome in that particular facet of personality. This is, I think, where if we can crack that code, when we crack that code, things shift pretty quickly in terms of just making sure that the train is on the tracks and it's going down the tracks as fast as possible. But that competence piece is something that when it's an average amount of competence compared to other people, if you're a super high achiever, it can feel like a disability. So those are some of the things that come through with the NEO. What else do I want to say about that? Or I could talk about it like we could do. I know.
Just kidding.
No, for reals. Hashtag for reals.
Oh, Michelle's saying you're describing so much my life. Michelle, we feel you. Like I really, this is why we're doing this, because I think that a huge number of people have this and just don't know, because you've been made wrong your whole life. So you've been told that these are things you need to fix, or that everyone's just smarter than you, or like whatever, we internalize from this, or even the interpretation that we place on people's commentary or people's behavior around us. And like Robin's saying, like people with ADHD are likely highly, highly imaginative, creative, intuitive, intelligent, and they've had to, and you're probably tired, by the way, because you're having to exert so much energy trying to look normal, and I say that in
Mhm.
quotations, and try to like function the way this left-brained world is set up, right? Because it's really designed for left-brained people. Nothing wrong with left brain, just saying, right? Well, there's a lot of right-brained people. And so how do people get in touch with you for the NEO assessment? Like I'll say it's really everyone in my world I tell to go get a NEO
Mhm.
assessment, and they usually do. And
Mhm.
then I know that it's not just getting the assessment, then you're helping people create a next step plan of like, okay, great. So here's what we've discovered about you. How do we
Right.
make this work for you? How do we take what's already amazing about you and just keep amplifying that instead of looking at these tiny little things that are quote unquote problems and focusing on those.
I always love to do focus on strengths, because when we're really focusing on strengths, then whatever's going on in the background that might be kind of nipping at your heels in terms of your brain, how you're thinking, how you're being in the world, can be pretty minimized, as long as you've got these I call them the divine prescriptions, but these things in place to be able to support you, because we do need to be supported. And that's one of the kind of the myths I see among the entrepreneurs, is that we're supposed to do all of this all by ourselves. And it's simply not true. And it's simply not possible. And yet, for the ADHDers, it can be one of those things that there's a lot of pressure. I should be able to do this on my own. Why can't I? And God forbid I would ask for help. So the way that you would get in touch with me for the NEO is, first of all, you can go just to my website, drrobynmckay.com, drrobynmckay.com. And if you just hang out there for like 3 seconds, there's a quiz that pops up. That's the leadership styles quiz. I love to have people take that, because that gives just a really clear understanding of, what is your leadership style? Are you a visionary leader? Are you a collaborative leader, a quiet leader, or a competitive leader? Because the leadership style is actually part of the NEO. It's part of that bigger assessment. And then from there, so I would say start there. But if you do want to have the NEO, if this is like I need this like yesterday, I would say at this point, just shoot me an email and we'll get you set up with the link to the NEO that you can register for that. So my direct email is Robyn, ROBYN, at drrobynmckay.com. Just shoot me an email. I like to do things really simply over here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you want to keep things simplified, given that you've got so much going on, right? I'm also thinking too, I don't have ADD or ADHD that I know of. I really don't have the markers for that.
No, you don't.
I'm probably a little bit more spectrumy. I can be pretty direct and not always, saying the words that I want to say. But that being said, part of why I wanted to invite you on too is I thought, oh, geez, how do I'll naturally have a high percentage of people with ADHD in my programs. How would you recommend that those of us that are entrepreneurs offering service, of course, to people that will have ADHD, among many other things, right? But with this in particular, like, what are some things for us to take into consideration as far as like program design or length of calls or length of program or anything, how to schedule things? Like what kind of tactical tips could you give us right now as to how we can better support our clients that may be experiencing this?
So, oh my gosh.
This is another live.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It occurs to me though, there's a couple of things. For private coaching, I actually have started doing this with some of the top entrepreneurs in our space, is doing roundtables, executive roundtables for their private clients. So everybody comes together with the NEO. I do a group interpretation of the NEO so that you as coach can understand personality and understand, maybe how ADHD, or even if you're on the spectrum, how that can inform or sometimes interfere with levels of success. So that's one thing, to create a round table and have me come in and do the NEO for everybody. And it's really fun because you get to learn so much about yourself and other people as well. But in terms of program design, one of the things that entrepreneurs do is overload programs with all the bonuses and all the things. And really all that does for people with ADHD is it activates their achievement striving. Yes, I want to check all the boxes. Yes, I want to do all the things. But it also simultaneously creates the conditions for them to feel like I'm never gonna be able to do this. There's too much. It's too overwhelming. And so I might buy a program and love all the bonuses, but the chances of me getting to all the bonuses are about like less than 3%, I would say. Mm-hmm. So just be real mindful about how much you're offering and call out some of the or drip it out is the other thing. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that I've seen, I've been in this industry a long, long time, and especially with self-study or home study programs, when you send everything all at once, that's something that for an ADHDer is going to feel at first very exciting and very interesting and very curious, and then and they'll do a little bit of work on it, and then it'll go the way of, you know, shelf help rather than self-help. So those are a couple of things off the bat that I can think of that would be supportive for people with ADHD. But for yourself, I would say spend some time. And by the way, I'm working on something that will support coaches who work with people. Chances are good that they do have ADHD. I know I haven't said this. Something like 40% of girls go undiagnosed as children because they don't have the classic hyperactivity symptoms that the boys have in the stereotypical ADHD scenario. So when we extrapolate that into adulthood, I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. Mm-hmm. And so now we've got this, you know, who knows how many in entrepreneurship aren't diagnosed. And the ones who are, when you think about like Gary Vee, who's kind of a classic, when you think about entrepreneur / ADHD, you think about Gary Vee, but he's a classic male stereotype in my mind anyway of ADHD. I haven't diagnosed him obviously, but in my observation, that's what I see. The other thing I would say, two other things, one is the bravado, the hiding behind bravado, and the procrastination. If you see somebody who's not following through on their coaching, who says that they're going to do something and then they go away and you don't see them again, chances are good that we're not going to diagnose them, obviously, but I want us to have that as a question mark, something for them to explore. Because if that's the problem, then it's not because they don't want it badly enough. It's not because they're not working hard enough. It's not because they're disrespecting you. It's simply owing to the way that the ADHD is being expressed in their systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can think of some situations over the years that comes to mind. So yeah, and now that we know, we can obviously do things differently. So, boy, we could talk for a long time. I actually think it would be great if we could do another live on just specifically how coaches can support people. And I'm saying coaches, but really any consultants, healers.
Well, even in the corporate space too. One of the things that I love that's going on in corporate is that there is now more of a focus on neurodiversity. Dare I say this? I'm going to, because it's my observation that I think the neurodiversity that's being focused on is autism spectrum disorders. Nothing wrong with that. That's important. It is so important for that to be focused on, especially in the tech space and healthcare, fintech. The ones who are, again, not being acknowledged or kind of part of that are the inattentive type ADHD, typically women who just, aren't getting all their work done, or, missing their meetings or being late for their meetings or whatever. And they're the ones who get labeled as irresponsible or not detail oriented or careless or whatever. So again, it's one of those, like, we need to kind of bring more of a focus and spotlight on that within the corporate culture as well, because those folks are the ones who also have
how
gifts.
How frustrating and concerning that would be for people that have a job that are being performance managed, and they know they're very smart, and yet they're being performance managed, and they're trying to be responsible, and they know their stuff and all the things. And then they're getting letters from HR or their manager or whatever saying, hey, you gotta,
early in my career, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry as a medical writer, a clinical scientist. And I can't tell you how many times I got dinged by QC, QA for, you missed 2 spaces after your period, Robin, not 1. Or, you transpose numbers. Oh my God, like it was constant. And we needed to be precise. My brain was not wired for that detail work. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So I just thought I was incompetent, and I just thought I was careless. And they just thought I don't think anybody thought I was incompetent, but definitely there was a level of carelessness. So I had to put things in place in order to protect myself and whatever document I was working on too, from my brain, protect my document from my brain by having somebody review it and look at it and polish it for me, because I just I could not see the details sometimes.
I feel you. I think next week I'm going to be leading a webinar on the 3 archetypes that entrepreneurs need to understand and figure out how to master, right? And they're all very different. And I'm not going to give it away because it's too long to get into. But with me being a visionary, right? It's when you ask my brain to come down into piddly details and you want me to start manually scheduling coaching times and stuff, I'm just... It's not that I don't want to, it actually hurts my head to bring my head down into details, right? Which is why I have an amazing COO who handles all of the details. It's fantastic.
That's your high imagination. That's that high imagination in your Neo that we see.
Yeah,
like
and I would
down into the weeds is like, poof.
Yeah. So imagine if you're a visionary and you've got ADHD, right? And
so I don't have to imagine it.
Focus on, let's talk about the weather today. And you're like, can we talk about some actual world problems that we can solve? Okay. Yeah. So, well, Robin has committed to doing this again. We're going to take a different angle next time, but genuinely we're doing this to be of high service to you and Robin, indulge my desire to help as many people as possible with this, because it occurs to me how many people I've unknowingly and of course unintentionally let down because I was misinterpreting some of these. But they're so, Robin, thank you for being here and they can kind of keep following what you do an EO assessment.
Can you say that last part again, Jennifer? I missed that.
Yeah, if you can let people know how they can stay in touch with you in general, and then if they want to book the NEO assessment. So 2 different things.
Yeah, so stay in touch with me. Go take the quiz on my website, drrobinmckay.com. And then if you are in for the NEO, just email me. It's very simple, and we'll get you set up with the link, Robin, ROBYN, at drrobinmckay.com. And just very simple to do it that way. That's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Robin. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And all of you that have been watching, whether you're watching live or on the replay, let us know in the comments what you're taking away. And Robin, I'll get you to come back if you don't mind afterwards to type the link for your quiz, because I know you have an easy link for the quiz.
I do.
In the comments. And thank you for being here, everyone. We hope you have a fantastic week, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.